A little girl, paralyzed from the waist down, accidentally knocked over a glass of water in a crowded diner. Silence fell, and everyone's eyes looked away. Then, a waitress with a faint scar running down her wrist quietly knelt to wipe the floor. She gently hugged the girl. No one knew she had once stood on the edge of disappearing until the moment she realized that some hugs can't rewrite the past, but they can lift a trembling heart back to life. If the person who has experienced the deepest despair is the one who saves you with kindness, would you still doubt the existence of goodness on a cold morning? Misty rain clung to the window of a small diner at the corner of the street. Street lights still glowed faintly, reflecting in shimmering puddles on the sidewalk. A black SUV pulled up outside. A middle-aged man stepped out wearing a thick coat. The light from a metal watch gleamed on his wrist. He opened the back door, bent down, and carefully lifted a little girl with patience and skill. Sophie, 8 years old, with brown hair tied in a crooked ponytail, sat in a worn pastel-colored wheelchair. Her legs were motionless. She muttered something in a hoarse, mumbling voice loud enough to make a few people in the diner turn their heads. A middle-aged woman sighed. A young couple whispered to each other and shook their heads. Matthew pushed her through the door. The bell above gave a soft chime. One hand held an umbrella, the other pushed the chair. His eyes scanned the room, a habit from years of meetings and negotiations, but this time, his gaze was cautious. He caught a look directed at his daughter. No one said a word, but the atmosphere grew colder. The diner wasn't busy. The clinking of silverware on plates echoed softly. A young server stared at Sophie before looking away. The shop owner sat behind the counter, pretending not to notice. No one moved. Then Anna stepped out from behind the kitchen curtain. Her uniform was simple, a white shirt and a gray apron. A faint scar ran down her left wrist. She was petite, with neatly tied brown hair and calm, deep eyes. Looking at Sophie, she smiled. It wasn't pity, that would be rude. It was recognition. She said softly and warmly, clear as a morning greeting, "Would you two like some breakfast?" Matthew nodded, his voice dry, mentioning something wheelchair accessible. Anna pointed toward the table near the window where light filtered through faded floral curtains. "What about over there?" There were plenty of open seats, and Matthew pushed Sophie that way. The girl fumbled, her hand trembling as she reached for the glass. Water spilled out, spreading across the tablecloth with a soft clinking sound. A man sitting at the next table frowned. The server behind the counter looked up. Matthew exhaled sharply, his eyes darkening. He was used to this. He grabbed a napkin and wiped up the spill, his movements quick and almost mechanical. Anna said nothing. She stepped forward and knelt beside Sophie, carefully wiping the water, looking into the girl's eyes. "Do you want pancakes or waffles today?" She looked away from Sophie's face. The girl startled and looked up. Anna asked calmly, her eyes never leaving Sophie's face. The girl startled and looked up, blinking her wide eyes. "Waffles with blueberries." Anna nodded. Then, still with that hoarse voice, she said, "Waffles with blueberries." Anna nodded again, coming right up. "I'll make it even better." "All right." Matthew watched, his hand gripping the edge of the table. Something shifted slightly on his face, but something quietly cracked inside him. Anna placed a damp napkin on Sophie's lap and gently wiped her hands like a mother would. "No rush. No pity, just being there." Sophie whispered, "You're so kind." Anna smiled. "So are you." "Oh." Throughout the meal, Anna didn't ask Matthew many questions, but she made sure Sophie had enough syrup, clean napkins, and a soft straw perfectly placed to reach her lips. No one in the diner said a word, but the tense atmosphere eased. The nearby couple looked away. The owner quietly polished the kitchen counter. When breakfast ended, Matthew placed some bills on the table and looked at Anna, really looked at her. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but just nodded slightly. Anna nodded back. No words needed. At the door, Sophie turned and waved. Anna waved back softly, as if they'd known each other for years. The door closed behind them. The bell rang again, soft as a breath. Inside, Anna stood still by the uncleared table, her eyes still fixed on the window. The damp napkin lay there, their silence thick, like the gaze of a child finally seen. Anna stood quietly in the diner, watching the fading figures of father and daughter through the misty rain beyond the window. The damp napkin remained on the table, a small, unnoticed thing, but not meaningless. A breath escaped, so gentle only she noticed it. She bent down to clear the table. The scent of waffles lingered in the air. A melting ice drop ran off the glass, spreading across the surface like ink. As she wiped clean, her hand brushed against a small silver spoon, something no one else had noticed. Anna froze. Her fingers stopped at the handle, where a faint curved scratch caught the light, almost like a scratch she remembered on another spoon from long ago. And then, like a sudden rain shower on a quiet afternoon, the memory flooded back. She must have been about 8 years old then. The orphanage was on the outskirts of the city, its high brick walls always smelling strongly of leftover food. Breakfast was just thin porridge and a few slices of stale bread. Each child was given one spoon. If it got lost, there was no replacement. Anna's spoon was different, a small silver piece left by someone who had passed. The handle was gently curved, engraved with a faded rose. It was scratched, imperfect, but it was hers. She washed it more carefully than the others and hid it under her pillow. That night, she was afraid someone would take it. One morning, she saw Timmy, a younger boy, have his food snatched by older kids. The boy didn't cry, just curled up in a corner. Anna gave him some of her porridge and quietly pressed the silver spoon into his hand. "Keep it like that," she whispered. "I'll get it back later." But Timmy was beaten. The spoon was taken. It never came back. Anna was punished for causing trouble. She scrubbed the kitchen floor with a stiff brush for a week. Her hands blistered, and at one point she scratched her wrist not to hurt herself. But because she was holding on to her shame so tightly she couldn't express it any other way. She never cried. No one noticed. After that, she had no more spoon of her own. But she learned something else. Even if she couldn't keep anything for herself, she could still make someone feel cared for, noticed. Now, in the present, Anna still held the silver spoon from Sophie's table. She looked at it for a long moment, then carefully set it down, as if returning a family heirloom to its rightful place. She turned back to the kitchen, but for the rest of her shift, her mind stayed soaked in the damp echoes of long-ago mornings, the creaking wooden floor under bare feet, the gentle touch wiping away someone else's tears when no one wiped hers. The gentle touch wiping away someone else's tears. A co-worker came in. "Hey, Anna, looks like the dinner rush is going to be busy. Better get some extra pancakes ready." "Yeah," she said, her voice distant. "Don't forget the blueberries. Someone small might come again." He shrugged, didn't ask. That night, when the diner closed, Anna cleaned up one last time. She placed the silver spoon in a small box behind the counter, not out of sentiment, but because, in a strange way, it reminded her why she chose this life, why she didn't keep running away. In a city obsessed with progress, where everyone rushes toward what they call success, she chose to be human. Stop, kneel down, and ask a child who can't walk, "What do you want to eat today?" Because some things aren't taught at school or even at home. You only learn these things when you lose something too soon. At home, Anna's apartment is small but tidy. On her kitchen table is an old photo frame, not a family picture, but a faded photo from an orphanage. 10 kids sitting around a table. Only one isn't looking at the camera as she sets down the teapot. While the water heats, she reaches for a teacup and fills it up. Steam rises, fogging up the mirror near the stove. She whispers, "No one, maybe not even myself, ever taught me how to love myself, but I did learn how to make someone feel loved." Stopping outside the diner, and she knows if that black SUV stops outside the diner again tomorrow morning, she'll kneel down, eye to eye with that little girl, and wait patiently without needing thanks. Night falls, bringing with it the damp chill of relentless rain and the sound of raindrops tapping on the porch roof. In Anna's small kitchen, soft golden light fills the old wooden table where she sits alone, just like she does after every shift. Steam rises from the cup of tea in front of her, untouched. Her eyes close, memories gently surfacing just beneath the surface, like something long buried, now quietly rising. She just put the silver spoon away in the left drawer, where she keeps little things that hold pieces of her memory. As her fingers lightly brush the edge of the wood, Sophie's face appears vivid and bright, and also the slight tension in Matthew's hand when she set the glass of water beside him. No, thank you. No shared glance, only the tension of a man trying to hold on to something that's starting to break apart. The next morning, the rain has stopped. The streets are still wet, faintly glistening under the old steel-gray sky. That familiar black SUV stops in front of the diner. Anna looks up while wiping a table, not surprised, not expecting it, but her eyes soften a little. Matthew walks in, pushing Sophie's wheelchair. Today the girl is wearing a yellow sweater decorated with little daisies. When she sees Anna, she smiles and nods gently. Anna returns the gesture, not too warm, not too distant, but just enough to make Sophie's smile grow wider. They choose the same table. Matthew doesn't order right away. He sits down, lightly tapping his fingertips on the table. When Anna comes over, she carefully sets down 2 menus. No one says a word for a moment. Sophie hums a little tune, gently swaying. "I'll bring you a black coffee," Anna says softly, like before. Matthew nods. "Yes, thank you." She came back with a cup of coffee. The heat fogged up the glass cup. He didn't drink, didn't look at her, just stared out the window, where yesterday's rain still lingered in silent streaks on the glass. After a moment, he spoke, his voice deep and hoarse, still not turning towards her. "I said I grew up in an orphanage." Anna paused. "I did that a long time ago." He nodded again and fell silent. The coffee cup between them cooled, the steam fading into whispers. Sophie. She was paralyzed since birth. He continued. "Her mother died when she was only 4 months old. I never intended to be a father, especially of a child like her." Anna didn't interrupt. She sat in the chair across from him, leaning slightly forward. Not out of curiosity, but from a quiet, complete presence. "At first," Matthew spoke slowly, "I thought I would get used to it. I have money, nurses, doctors, but no one tells you that the real pain isn't when she falls. It's when she smiles at someone else, as if she has never known pain." He laughed softly, emptily, brittle. "You know, every time someone looks at her with pity, it's like they're tearing apart all the effort I've put in." Anna didn't respond. She just placed her hand near his coffee cup without touching it. Just that day. "I don't want everyone to feel sorry for her," he said. "I just want her to be seen." The silence between them was not cold. It held something fragile. Sophie, just a few steps away, was busy with a small pastry that Anna had brought earlier. The girl seemed unaware of the conversation, or perhaps in the secretive way children often do, she listened with her own attention. Matthew said he hadn't cried since his wife died, not allowing himself to do so, not when she needed me to be strong. But yesterday he looked directly at Anna when you knelt beside her, wiped the table, and asked her what she wanted for breakfast. I almost cried. For the first time, Anna didn't look away. Their gazes lingered for a few long seconds, unmoving. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the fading steam from the coffee cup marked that moment. She said weakly, "You don't have to be strong forever." Louder than a breath. Matthew didn't respond, but his hand reached for the napkin, slowly folding it in his palm as if holding on to something fragile and still forming. That morning, nothing big happened. No tears, no hugs, just a cup of cold coffee. 2 adults sat in silence, and the quiet space between them became a little clearer. The morning passed in gentle warmth and quiet. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting a soft golden glow on the old wooden table. Sophie burst out laughing when she saw her pancake decorated with a tiny smiling face made of chocolate syrup and blueberries. That sound rang out like a bright note in the slow melody of the diner. Matthew, still silent, smiled softly. Not quite a smile, but something softer appeared on his face. Anna stood by the table, one hand gently resting on Sophie's chair back. In that brief moment, she reached out with her other hand and lightly stroked her left wrist, where the faint scar remained. That action was subconscious, lasting less than a second, But Matthew noticed. He glanced, then looked away, saying nothing. However, something got stuck in his chest. He understood. Not all wounds manifest like bruises. That night, the diner was quieter than usual. The air had cooled. The wind slipped through the window cracks, making the curtains rustle. Anna was wiping down tables when Matthew returned alone. "Are you still open?" he asked, his voice soft. She nodded. "It's just me. Please sit." He chose the same table. No Sophie, no coffee. Just a man with his hands tightly clasped as if holding something fragile. Anna brought a warm kettle and poured him a cup of peppermint tea. She was a bit feverish. Matthew said, as if to explain, "I left her with the nurse." Anna sat across from him. She didn't ask anything more, but her eyes had a way of drawing out things that people often don't say. "My wrist," he began after a moment of silence. "I looked for it this morning." Anna paused for a moment, instinctively tugging at her sleeve, then stopped. "Wait," she sighed, and slowly. It's okay," she said softly. "It doesn't hurt anymore." He didn't say anything. She spoke, her voice like wind waiting. She sighed, and slowly. When she spoke, her voice glided over the pages like wind, almost imperceptible but steady. "I'm 19, just out of the orphanage for 3 months, working at a diner in the next town. No friends, no family. One winter night, I found myself on a bridge, the old bridge over the wide river." Matthew stood still, his gaze gently on her. "I didn't cry. I just felt tired, as if I were invisible, as if I had gone a month without hearing anyone call my name. No one would notice if I disappeared." She looked out the window, where the streetlight glowed dimly in the fog. "But just as I climbed over the railing, I heard a cry. Lost mother, standing a child, maybe 6 years old, had lost their mother and was standing alone at the foot of the bridge. Her voice caught in my throat. I climbed down and led them until I found their mother." The silence lingered, not empty, but filled. "I guess no one knows that story because there was no dramatic ending. I just didn't go back to the bridge. And since then, I believe if someone out there still needs a hug, then I won't disappear." A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away, letting it fall as if tonight was finally the night she could cry. Matthew reached out, not to touch, but to place his hand near hers, close enough to share the space, to say, "I'm here." He understood. He gently said, "I stood outside my wife's hospital room, holding our newborn in my arms while the woman I loved was dying inside, and I thought, no one needs me anymore." Anna looked at him. Their eyes met across that fragile silence, a silence not of absence, but of recognition. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside the diner, something had settled. "It's not that I never wanted to disappear," Anna said, her voice even now. "It's just that I'm still here." Matthew nodded as if someone was retrieving a piece of memory he didn't have, knowing it had been lost. The tea between them had cooled, but the atmosphere remained warm. They didn't need to say anything more. The scar on her wrist was still there, but now it was no longer a sign of despair. It was the silent testament of a choice to stay for someone who might still need to be held. The sky turned cloudy the next morning, carrying the silence of a night that contained more than just words. The little diner on the corner welcomed the warmest rays of sunshine possible, a gentle beam streaming through the frosted glass and shining down on the familiar tables and chairs. The smell of roasted coffee mingled with warm butter in the air. Nothing was different, but inside Anna, something had shifted. Her conversation with Matthew wasn't just the first time she spoke her pain. It was the first time she felt she wasn't alone in the silence of the past. Now she understood. Some people carry their pain without making a sound, and they recognize each other not through words, but through a shared glance. That morning, he returned with Sophie. She wore a light floral dress, her hair tied up, not too neatly with a blue ribbon braid. Today, she was smiling more. As Matthew pushed her wheelchair through the door, she waved at Anna from across the room. Anna bent down, pretending to be surprised. "Well, look who's all dressed up. Is today someone's royal birthday?" Sophie giggled. "I'm not a princess. I'm a chef." "A chef, huh?" Anna laughed. "So, does Chef Sophie want a smiley pancake or a superhero waffle?" "Smiley pancake!" Sophie shouted excitedly, happily pushing her wheelchair, trying to get closer to Anna. Matthew, distracted by a phone call, turned away for just a second, just long enough for a sharp sound. Cash cut across the room. The back wheel had slipped off the edge of the rug. The wheelchair tipped. Sophie lunged forward. Everything happened both too fast and too slow. Fast, yet slow. The sound of the crash echoed through the small space. The wheelchair toppled over. Sophie hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. Cutlery fell from a nearby table. A couple gasped, hands covering their mouths. The owner suddenly stood up behind the counter, a look of panic flashing across her face. Matthew spun around, his face pale. Sophie wasn't crying, but her lips were pressed tight, eyes wide in shock. Anna didn't scream, didn't panic. She moved quickly, precisely, and knelt beside Sophie in a gentle, unhurried, measured breath. Just practical. "You're okay," she whispered, holding the little girl tightly like a nest. "You have me. You're safe now." Sophie leaned into her face, buried her head in Anna's shoulder, and let the tears fall. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears from a child who still didn't know how to ask for comfort. Standing a few feet away, Matthew stood a few feet away. His hands trembled, clenched tight. His eyes locked on his daughter, blinking, frozen. And then, what he had never allowed himself finally happened. Tears, one by one. They fell to the hardwood floor. He stepped forward, sitting down next to Anna. He didn't try to pull Sophie away from her embrace, not saying, "I can do this." He just sat there. Anna looked up and for the first time saw the man once known as the coldest CEO in the city with red-rimmed eyes, as if to say, "Look, the boy just learned how to cry. I thought I had forgotten how." He whispered, his voice choked. Anna gently shook her head. "Tears aren't weakness. They're your heart reminding you that it still feels." Sophie glanced up, catching her father's gaze. Matthew pressed his lips together and reached for a cloth from Anna's apron. He wiped his daughter's face, carefully, steadily. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have been there." Sophie just nodded, then nestled back into Anna's embrace. An inanimate object, but now a symbol of the wheelchair lay tipped over, one back wheel still spinning. The feeling of losing control and an inanimate object, but now a symbol of the feeling of losing control and the meaning of waking up to that truth. Anna helped Sophie back into her seat. Adjusting the straps, Matthew took her hand, squeezing gently as if to apologize for all the words he had never learned to say. The diner was silent, but in that silence, someone quietly placed a glass of orange juice on Sophie's table. A middle-aged customer nodded slightly to Anna. The owner stood still, staring at the little girl. That morning, there were no applause, no neatly packaged lessons tied with ribbons, just a child being held, a father crying for the first time, and a woman who had almost vanished, now becoming the safest place they had ever known. After the accident that day, the wheelchair was repaired, and Sophie only had a few scratches, but something inside Matthew changed subtly, irreparably. He started coming to the diner more often, not just because Sophie loved her smiley pancakes, but because something tender had touched a part of him he had long believed had hardened beyond feeling. Anna didn't mention the fall. The next morning, she greeted them with a quiet smile, no sign of pity in her eyes. No, "Are you okay?" No look of concern disguised with kindness. She simply poured water, laid out napkins, adjusted the tablecloth, and placed beside Sophie's plate a neatly folded cloth napkin with a small embroidered daisy in one corner. That morning, Matthew noticed everything. Sophie ate slowly, her hands trembling from fatigue. When she dropped her fork, Anna didn't falter. She stepped forward, picked it up, wiped the table with a soft cloth she took from her apron. Then she sat down at eye level with Sophie, like she always did. "You're fine," she said, winking. "Everyone has a day that feels a little shaky." Sophie smiled shyly and gently, not embarrassed, not like she had made a mess. Matthew sat quietly, inadvertently stirring the cold coffee in his cup, his eyes silently watching Anna, and in that stillness, he began to see the unspoken things, but never unintended. How Anna always tucked a soft cushion under Sophie's feet, even though no one ever asked her, washed Sophie's cutlery separately by hand in warm water, not the dishwasher, the corner seat, always cleaner than the others because she wiped it down after each customer, and now the cloth napkin, light pink, hand-stitched, clearly not mass-produced. Sophie didn't notice, but Matthew did. He looked down at his coffee cup. A thought passed through like a gentle breeze. Some people choose to remain unnoticed as long as someone else is cared for. By the end of breakfast, as Anna walked by, Matthew spoke his first words to her. Since Sophie fell, "Did you sew it for her?" Anna paused and nodded. "I felt her hands were cold. The fabric is softer than paper." Matthew nodded in response. But it wasn't just a thank you. It was also an acknowledgement. "You do a lot of this?" he asked, the question opening up like a door. Anna smiled, a soft laugh hidden beneath her breath. "Only when I have the time and the right mood. They're not for display. They are for making others feel remembered." That statement, like a bomb and a weight pressing down on Matthew. He looked at the tiny handkerchief on Sophie's lap, now stained with blueberry syrup, and his eyes watered unexpectedly. Then, as he helped Sophie into the car, he turned back. "Are you sewing for anyone else?" he asked. Anna smiled lightly. "Not many people to sew for. I'm not good at talking. I only know how to do little things." Matthew looked at her, really looking for the first time without measuring or pulling back. It was a quiet recognition, as if he finally saw someone who had been there all along, just out of his sight. That night, in the office, Matthew sat alone. On his desk was the handkerchief Anna had given to Sophie, left in her coat pocket. He touched the embroidered daisy, the stitches slightly uneven, imperfect, but honest. A sincerity that couldn't be mistaken, and a thought echoed, not in Anna's voice, but in his own voice. She didn't need to say much because true kindness never seeks to be seen. That handkerchief that day didn't just wipe blueberry syrup from Sophie's fingers. It quietly absorbed something else, something gentle and unspoken from Matthew. That night he came home later than usual, not because of deadlines, but because he sat at his desk, his fingertips gliding over the embroidered daisy, his eyes much softer than in past years. Something inside him had changed. Not suddenly, not like a crack or an explosion, but like groundwater flowing beneath the surface. A quiet transformation from a man leading a rational company into a father beginning to wonder, what if the world could be different? What if the world could be different if there were more people like Anna? The next morning, Matthew didn't take Sophie to the diner. Instead, he went back alone right when the diner opened, the air still crisp from the early chill. Anna was adjusting the tablecloth. She looked up, surprised, but didn't show much. "You're here early," she said, her tone calm. Matthew nodded, holding a steaming cup of tea. "I brought this and something I want to ask." Anna raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" He sat down in his usual spot, placing the cup of tea between them. "Like a proposal. You know I run a tech company, right?" "Well, according to the rumor," she replied with a small smile. "We're starting a community project to design assistive devices for children with disabilities, mobility, and communication aids. But I'm missing someone who understands how those kids feel and what the adults beside them carry." Anna paused for a moment, then smiled softly. "You mean me," he said, "not just because you're an expert, but because you see." Anna tilted her head, unsure if he was serious. "You understand the little things that make Sophie feel safe. That's what my designers can't create in the conference room." She pressed her lips together. "I don't have a degree or experience. I'm just someone who once wanted to disappear." Matthew paused, then said, "Not everyone can reach people the way you do." Silence. Anna looked down at her hands. Her calloused fingers were full of tiny scars, scabs from vegetable chopping, burns from the winter stove, cracks from dish soap that no cream could heal. "Are you sure?" she gently asked as a challenge. Matthew nodded. "Definitely. I'm not sure you'll get everything right on the design, but I'm sure if anyone can make those kids smile, it's you." Anna leaned back in her chair, studying him longer than usual. Her eyes didn't light up, but they were deep, as if someone was quietly unlocking a long-closed door. "Honestly," she said slowly, I never thought someone would ask me to help change something. I just thought I was good enough to clean up spills, catch kids when they fall, and pour tea without spilling. Matthew smiled. And sometimes that's exactly the person the world needs. She didn't respond immediately, but that afternoon, when she returned after break, she held a piece of paper, slightly crumpled at the corners, sketched in pencil, smudged with 1 or 2 fingerprints. She placed it in front of Matthew. I don't know how to use the software, but this is what Sophie once told me. Maybe you can do something with it. He looked down at a rough drawing of a wheelchair with awkward arrows, childlike, pointing to sections with messy notes, a spot for a doll, a place for feet, air to avoid pain, able to fold for train travel. Matthew gazed at the sketch. His eyes lingered on the uneven lines, the jagged handwriting, but he smiled. Not the polite smile of an executive, but the smile of a man who had been deeply moved and knew it. That night, he placed the drawing beside his computer screen. He didn't touch the spreadsheets, didn't answer emails. He just looked at the drawing of someone who hadn't studied design, didn't know the program, but had drawn every line from a heart that had learned to care, every silent action. And with that, the invitation had been extended, not because she was the most qualified, but because she was always there, quietly lighting up every room she entered. That afternoon, when the cafe was quiet after lunch, Anna stood behind the counter, still holding the pencil sketch in her hand. The pencil marks on the paper, awkward, uneven, pencil sketch in her hand. But each piece of paper carried something pure, small, and deeply real. This part for the doll, and this part so my feet won't hurt. Her heart raced, not from anxiety, but from something deeper. This wasn't a task. It wasn't a proposal, but something much more intimate, much more real. For a long time, Anna had believed she never had an obligation to be part of anything important. But now, a child had handed her a drawing, and in doing so, she had given herself trust. The next day, the sun returned with a soft golden light. Sophie came back to dinner with Matthew, a folded colored paper tucked behind her like a secret. As Anna approached, Sophie beamed and handed her the paper. A rainbow-colored drawing of a wheelchair with a heart on the wheels and a scrawled message in marker saying, "Ms. Anna drew this. Isn't it beautiful?" Anna froze. Her hands trembled, not from surprise, but from something that had been suppressed within her for so long, finally bubbling up. Unstoppable. She looked into Sophie's wide, unprotected eyes, eyes too young to know they had just touched the deepest part of an adult woman. Anna took the paper and hugged the girl in silent embrace. Matthew watched from the table, his eyes resting on Anna, quietly filled with gratitude. That night, in her small apartment, Anna placed the colored page next to her original sketch for Matthew. 2 pages, 2 different outlines. Hai Trang, 2 different outlines, but both drawn from the same place, love. She sat down and opened her old laptop. The screen lit up slowly, flickering a bit. But that didn't matter. She searched for child-friendly wheelchair designs, lightweight materials for mobility, not because someone asked her to, but because for the first time she believed she could create something not small. Weeks later, Anna walked into Matthew's office, not in an apron, not in dinner attire. She wore a plain white blouse, her hair neatly tied back, her gaze straight ahead. "Is that proposal still on the table?" she asked. Matthew looked up from his desk and smiled. "The proposal is still here, but this time, I'm not inviting you to be a support staff. I want you to be a co-designer." Anna smiled, then nodded. "As long as I don't have to wear a jacket." On her first day in the office, she didn't know how to open her email, but after 3 meetings, 2 afternoons alongside the engineering team, and a careful explanation that Sophie needed to rest her legs when she was tired, everyone started to listen, not because she was loud, my friend, but because everything she said came from the heart, trained to listen to things that no one else thought to ask. A month later, the first prototype was printed on a 3D printer. A lightweight wheelchair with space for a doll, soft padding on the seat, and a foldable frame so Sophie could take it on the train with her dad. Sophie was the first to try it. As she climbed in, her eyes lit up and she shouted, "So smooth." "Dad, Anna, Anna stood nearby, hands clasped behind her back, her eyes shining. But this time, she didn't hide the surging emotions in her chest. That night, in his home office, Matthew pinned a drawing to the wall. Not a design, not a financial chart, but Sophie's colorful drawing, featuring a heart-shaped wheel and the words, "Ms. Anna drew this." Below it, he added a single handwritten line, "Kindness is not pity, but seeing." In her apartment, Anna sat with a cup of mint tea. On her table was the final printed design. In the corner of the room, the words "Designed with Anna" were written in a clean, simple font. She stared at it for a long time, and then, like someone stepping out of the darkness without a spotlight, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I'm enough too." It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't a performance. It was a gentle, solid truth. Finally, she allowed herself to believe. Through this powerful story, we're reminded that kindness doesn't have to be loud to be life-changing. A simple act, kneeling to clean a spilled glass, offering a gentle hug, can restore dignity, soften silence, and even pull someone back from the edge of despair. The waitress, marked by her own scars, chose compassion over indifference. And in doing so, she not only comforted a frightened little girl, but also revealed the quiet strength that lives in empathy. Let's stand with her, the woman who saw beyond disability, beyond shame, and chose to care. What might happen if she allowed herself to believe that her story isn't over yet, that perhaps, just perhaps, she's also worthy of the same tenderness she so easily gives to others? We invite you to leave a comment of support for her, share a message of encouragement, or what you would tell someone like her if you met her in real life. And if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to subscribe to Touching Tales Hub, because here, every story we tell is a quiet reminder healing begins with one small act of love. Maybe the next story will be yours.